The Houston Ship Channel is a place built on fuel and flame. Tankers, pipelines, refineries, every inch of it is engineered to control danger. But on the 1st of September, 1979, the danger didn't come from a valve or a pipeline, it came from the sky. The outer bands of Tropical Storm Helene drifted into Houston that afternoon, carrying heat, pressure, and something far more unpredictable, lightning. And tied up to the Shell terminal beneath that darkening sky was the Chevron Hawaii, a ship full of vapor, heat, and fate. Tropical Storm Helene was weak on paper, barely a storm at all. But what it lacked in wind, it made up for in electrical violence. Lightning struck randomly across the ship channel, between cranes and tank farms. The crew of the Chevron Hawaii paused cargo discharge, watching the storm creep closer, but the ship remained tied up, warm, pressurized, and full of rising vapor. Hours earlier, the Chevron Hawaii had completed a hot saltwater tank wash. The steel was still warm from it. The feedstock in her center tanks was heated too, raising the temperature of the surrounding space. And inside those tanks, vapor expanded, slipping through the smallest weakness in the gaskets and the screens. Helene's winds carried that vapor forward towards the bow, where it settled, unseen beneath the forecastle. A fuel-rich cloud was forming. No one saw it, no one smelled it, and no one knew how dangerous the next minute would be. At exactly 14:12, the storm made its move. A bolt of lightning punched down from Helene's clouds and struck the deck between tanks 1 and 2. For a fraction of a heartbeat, the ship held its breath. Then the world tore open. Tank 1 ignited in a violent blast, then Tank 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. The deck peeled back like foil. A massive section of the hull launched across the channel, slamming into a petroleum tank ashore, setting it ablaze in seconds. The Chevron Hawaii became the center of a firestorm. Burning oil spilled from the ruptured tanks and poured onto the water. Driven by wind and rare reversed currents, the fire drifted towards the Shell barge slip. 4 barges sat there, hatches open. Towboats stood by but didn't move. The dockman had abandoned his station without hitting the emergency shutdown. Even the Coast Guard investigators arrived minutes later but didn't order the barges out. The fire reached them anyway. They ignited one after another, filling the slip with explosions that shook the terminal. Aboard the Chevron Hawaii, the surviving crew were trapped. The midship gangway, their normal escape, was gone, blown apart in the fiery blast. At the time of the explosion, the 2 Sperry technicians that were leaving the vessel were on the gangway. The port lifeboat was destroyed. Flames blocked every route forward. Aft of the accommodation block, they stood on a shrinking island of steel surrounded by fire. Their only hope was the starboard lifeboat, damaged, warped, half disabled, and jammed hard against the davits from the ship's growing port list. In the chaos, one officer stepped forward, Acting Chief Mark Mitchell. With explosions still echoing and flames rolling across the deck, he took control. He gathered the surviving crew. He accounted for every soul left alive. He organized the injured, and he turned to the lifeboat, the only way off the ship. Because of the ship's list, the lifeboat couldn't be lowered. The davits held it pinned. But Mark gave the order that would save their lives. The crew dragged the lifeboat aft, pulling it by hand through heavy smoke, burning debris, and blistering heat, until it reached a point where the falls could swing free. Metal screamed as it moved. Sparks fell around them, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. They lowered the lifeboat into the water. Only then did they discover that the engine had been destroyed. No motor, no power, just oars. and the burning ship collapsing behind them. The chief mate loaded the injured, steadied the crew, and gave the order to row. Chief mate Mark himself was injured during the explosion. He was slammed against a bulkhead and had fractured his collarbone. He and the other injured crew were now on the lifeboat, rowing together. The current that day was flowing upstream towards the stern of the Chevron Hawaii, exactly the opposite of normal. If the current had been running its usual direction, the flames would have overtaken the lifeboat within minutes. It was a race they very nearly lost. Every stroke of the oar pushed them away from the wall of fire that covered the water like a sheet of burning steel. And while the surviving crew fought for their lives off the stern, everything else around the Chevron Hawaii was beginning to fail. In the barge slip next to the tanker, 4 barges sat unsecured, ullage hatches open, flame screens off, cargo operations still active when the blast hit. The Shell dockman responsible for the operation fled his post without activating the emergency shutdown switch, located only a few steps from where he stood. Flaming product spread across the surface, rolled into the barge slip, ignited the open tanks one by one. The barges caught fire and then began to explode. The blast from the barges shook the entire terminal. 3 of the 4 sank where they were moored. The fires intensified everything. Heat, smoke, debris, all of it feeding into the same deadly chain reaction. When the Coast Guard's pollution response team arrived, they found open hatches, loose flame screens, and vapor so thick they could barely stand on deck. Coast Guard's own small boats began to fail. Thick layers of burning crude clogged intakes, choked engines, and rendered fire pumps useless. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, would later conclude that the disaster was not caused by a single mistake, but a chain of them, starting with the vapor migration and ending with emergency procedures that simply weren't followed. Tank hatches weren't all sealed, flame screens were missing or damaged, terminal personnel weren't trained or supervised properly, containment booms were stowed instead of deployed, and the towboats on standby did nothing to move the barges out of danger. NTSB issued sweeping recommendations: better gangway placement, stricter tank closure inspections, more aggressive barge emergency authority, improved Coast Guard boat design, and mandatory boom deployment during cargo transfers. The Chevron Hawaii was destroyed in seconds, but her lessons reshaped the industry. Behind the fire, the explosions, and the failure of systems was a story of survival, and of a crew who, even with the ship breaking apart beneath them, found a way out. Test 1 2, test 1 2. This is an interview on November the 19th, 2025 with Mark Michael about the Chevron Hawaii. So, just to get into it here, what I'm doing is I'm doing a project for a class, and they wanted us to review an incident that occurred that changed the industry. And I know that there were several things that came out of the Chevron Hawaii thing, and I'm making like a little movie about it, and I'm going to include some of what you say in this interview, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to just hear your story again, and then maybe ask you a few follow-up questions, if that's all right.
Sure, yeah. Okay, I was on the ship called the Chevron Hawaii in Texas, Houston Ship Channel, and at Deer Park, and the ship exploded at 14:12 on September 1st, 79. And luckily, there were a few guys killed and stuff like that. but luckily most of the people all got off, and so it was a good thing that we actually, every week we used to lower the lifeboats to the rail, and so everybody was pretty tuned in on that. So when the actual emergency happened, it was a piece of cake to get everybody down, and I'm very thankful. I figured, God must have something in mind for me if He let me survive, So it was a bad day all around, but it ended up being okay. And I was second mate on there, and I was kind of in my probationary period, training for chief mate, and this was going to be my first day as like being in charge. Just they let me go, just by myself, and they kind of watched me and stuff like that. So my first day wasn't very successful. And there's been some other people that I sailed with, and that I talked to that, they were worried when they first went chief mate. I was talking to them about it and stuff like that, And I said, "Hey, you did good, man. The ship didn't sink. Mine did."
That's fair.
But his didn't. So yeah, but it part of the problem was that they were starting to have the in the CFRs where you had to have vapor recovery and everything, and IGS, and Chevron got some extensions from the Coast Guard or whatever to try to delay everything, because it was going to be about $3 million to retrofit all this stuff, for the IGS end, and so they just delayed it, because at that time $3 million was a pretty good chunk of change there, So
yeah,
and so had we had IGS on the ship, nothing would have ever happened, because we kept the O2 level in the tanks at always below 5% oxygen, therefore no explosions. So that's kind of what happened. They don't know the exact cause of what happened, but we think we were loading, discharging, and cleaning a tank all at the same time. So there's a lot of fumes all over the deck and everything like that. The winds were pretty light, so that didn't dissipate anything. And they think that what happened was we were washing 2 Center, which was the biggest tank on the ship, and because of the water spinning around and stuff like that, you generated a lot of static electricity, and there was also there was some clouds and stuff like that in the area, and lightning in the area, and so we were in the process of shutting everything down, because Chevron had a policy that if you saw lightning or whatever, you're supposed to shut everything down, and then wait, after you get everything shut down, wait for 1 hour. If you haven't seen any more lightning, you can start back up and everything like that. Well, when you're down there in Texas in the fall and stuff like that, you have lightning all the time. It's like you'll never get out of port if you keep doing this,
Yeah.
So anyways, we shut everything down, and we were in the process of getting that done when it happened, and we were also having one of our radars worked on, 10 centimeter radar, and we had 2 technicians, young guys, that came up and did that and everything like that. And then when they got done, they were successful on the thing, but when they got done, they left the ship without having me sign the paperwork. And so no signature, no pay. Chevron doesn't pay. So they got out to the parking lot and stuff like that, and then they went, "Oh man, we forgot to have the papers signed," So they came back, met me on the main deck at the bottom of the gangway there, and I signed a paper for them and all that stuff, and you know, very shortly after that, I went inside the house, okay, because the ship's office was just inside the house on the main deck area. And so I was going to do some paperwork, and so it happened like right then. And those two guys were on the gangway when it blew, and so they were both dead. You know, they're both gone. So that was a very unlucky break for them. Had they had the paper signed, they would have not had a problem. They would have been okay. It's just one of those things. So we were able to get the boat in the water and stuff like that. I didn't know what had happened. I was inside the office, and all of a sudden I got thrown across the room and up against the bulkhead and hurt my shoulder, broke my collarbone, and hurt one of my knees. And I just thought maybe we got hit by another ship, a downbound ship or something like that, because you're parked right on the channel right there.
Mm-hmm.
And that has happened in the past. Luckily, it doesn't happen very often. But so that's pretty much what happened. The captain, the chief engineer, and the chief mate were all gone. They were off the ship just doing some shopping and stuff like that, because we were supposed to leave the next morning to go all the way up through the canal and up to El Segundo, California. And so the chief mate was a guy named Bill Mason. He was just a great guy, and but he was very, very nervous, and that's just not a good quality to have as chief mate, because you're always going to have things come up, and there's always going to be issues. And my attitude always was, well, when you have something come up, just take a deep breath, don't freak out, but just take that one thing and take care of that, because as soon as you get that one item taken care of, guess what? There's two more waiting for you. So, that's the type of attitude that I had. And so
That's good advice.
The captain, told the chief mate, no, we're going to be making a 2-week trip here to El Segundo. You got to put your feet on the ground. You're going to go to lunch with me and the chief. And the chief mate, he never went ashore. And he was like, oh, man, I can't do that. I just know that something will go wrong. I just know it. Like I said, he was very nervous about stuff. And the captain said, nope, you don't understand. You're coming with me. That's it. And so that's why he was ashore when this happened. Mm-hmm. And, the captain said, Mark's done this before. He knows what the drill is. And, you can handle this, right, Mark? I said, yeah, I can handle it. I can do it. I've done this before. So the loading, discharging, and butterworthing drill I had done before. So I had the ability to multitask, on that type of stuff. But I did a pretty good job at those kind of things. So it was just, I was extremely lucky that I ducked into the house. And had I not done that, if I would have been anywhere on the main deck, I would have been vaporized. We did have one AB that was at the manifold, closing all the valves, because, like I said, we're in the process of shutting everything down. And he was vaporized. We never found anything. We found a sneaker a couple 100 feet away on the shore. And that's all that we found of him. Nothing left. And so it was a rough day as far as that kind of stuff goes. But after that, the Coast Guard came down and rescued us from the boat, took us to their Coast Guard station, and where they had some ambulances waiting and stuff like that, because we did have guys that were hurt, and some of them had a little bit of burn damage. So, but they had some ambulances waiting there for us and everything like that. And the Coast Guard search and rescue guys, I just really, they're awesome. I mean, they did a great job. They know the drill, and So they really helped us out a lot. We didn't have any further casualties because of that, you know. And so I gained a whole new level of respect for the Coast Guard guys.
I'd say so.
Yeah, and they were a big help. A lot of us had injuries, but we really didn't feel it that much because you had so much adrenaline going that you don't feel it, you know, until after the adrenaline wears off, and then everything's killing you, you know. So yeah, that was what happened. So after that, it kind of worked out okay, you know, and everything like that.
Now the lifeboat, I remember you saying that it was damaged, right? Y'all had to row.
Yes, it was an open boat, one of the old open boat styles. We had one enclosed boat on the port side, and we were port side too. And the open boat was the one we used, of course. But it was just a regular old style lifeboat and everything like that. So it was damaged a little bit, but it still floated. So, you know, we were doing okay as far as that goes. So we were able to row. And the guys did a good job of getting the heck out of there because, you know, there were areas right in that slip area there where the water was on fire, you know, from all the MTBE, because they had all this MTBE additive that was in barges, and there were 3 barges right around the ship. And of course, they didn't have vapor recovery either, no IGS.
Yeah.
So they just blew right away. That stuff is extremely flammable. So,
Well,
yeah.
What products were you guys moving at the time? What were you pumping and loading and discharging?
We were doing crude oil,
Okay.
but several different grades of crude oil. And the one tank we were washing was from an ex crude oil tank. So, you know, when you're washing and you don't have IGS, the atmosphere in that tank is going to pass through the explosive range. And so if anything touches anything, it's going to blow. And so they think the ship that was across the Houston Ship Channel from us, the guy that was on watch over there, he said that he saw lightning strike the forward end of the Hawaii. And so what was happening was we're gathering these, you know, the tank is so big and you've got so much static electricity going that you can actually get like a rain cloud inside of the tank. And so what happens when you get a rain cloud? You get a lightning discharge. So we may have had lightning outside and inside at the same time.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was a shame because had you had IGS, nothing like that would have happened. So.
I know from the research I've done, a couple things is that there was the remnants of a Tropical Storm Helene, I think is what they called it, was in the area, and that one of the things that came out of this was placement of lifeboats eventually changed, and then the IGS systems.
Right.
Are those with you continued in the industry for quite a while in the tankers, especially for quite a while after this. Are there any other changes that you think came about because of this, or any other notable changes you'd like to talk about, like during your career?
Yeah, I don't really think there were so many specific changes, but the overall safety culture was really ramped up. I mean, we had always been pretty safety conscious at Chevron, but after that, it really got a lot tighter and stuff like that, which is good. That's a good thing. And so, you know, it's hard to believe, but in those days, I mean, we'd be standing watch with no coveralls, short sleeves, in shorts, sneakers, no safety shoes, no hard hat, nothing, you know. And so it's hard for people that sail nowadays to picture that. They're just like, what, you know? But it was true.
Yeah.
And, and so I think the overall safety culture just became a lot tighter, and so it's much better for everybody, you know.
Do you have any advice for someone who is involved in a marine casualty like this and then has to deal with investigators and the investigation process and all that? Is there anything you'd like to say about that process?
I think the only thing is to answer only the questions that they ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't elaborate, or don't add anything to what they're asking about. If they ask you a question, you give them a direct answer, and of course, you got to tell the truth. Don't lie. You can't be lying to the investigators or the Coast Guard or whatever. But yeah, I would just say keep it as short and truthful as you can to whatever they ask. That would be the best thing.
Well, I really enjoyed sailing with you. And like I said, I highly encourage you to do a training cruise if you want to, especially this next one, because I'll be on it as an employee, not as a student. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, wow.
Hopefully I will be. But is there any other advice that you have to people going into this industry in general?
I think in general, you just have to make sure that you have the right mindset. Like, for example, if you're joining the ship and stuff like that, you're probably going to be there for 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
So, or in the case of ABs, it might be longer. So I think you have to have the ability to just persevere and hang in there. And I think that's one of the things that school taught me was perseverance and self-discipline. And if you have those two things, you can do all right on the ship. It won't be too much of a problem. But if you're the type of person that freaks out at every little issue or something like that, then maybe that isn't the job for you.
That's
that
good
would
advice.
that's what I would think.
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.